Accountants as a whole are not great business owners. So you can build your own business, you park it under the dark horse veil, and we handle all the back-end support. So your IT infrastructure, your marketing, your website, the insurances, you name it, we're pretty much handling that. So you can just focus on providing service to clients, which is a full-time job in itself.
Welcome to Deduct This, powered by ProConnect Tax. This is where tax professionals come together to share ideas, experiences, and fresh perspectives to help you grow your practice and your future. We're glad you're here. Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to the Deduct This podcast with Carrie and Lexi. I'm Carrie.
I'm Lexi. If you guys are planning on growing your team or expanding your services, onboarding is probably the top of your list.
I am so excited. We have Max Fritz here today. How you doing, Max?
Great. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we have some stuff we want to talk to you about, right? You and your team have built a smarter way to bring on new staff and scale them over time. So I want to jump in, and if you could start telling us a little bit about you and your firm and how your team is structured.
Yeah. So Dark Horse CPAs, we're a platform CPA firm, so which is a bit different than what is out there in the industry right now. So we're a very entrepreneurial mindset firm. So I guess putting it simply, I think the best way to think of it is, I don't want to compare us to a franchise, but we take CPAs that the senior manager level, or maybe, on that partner track, and the partner's not retiring, or, maybe they just made junior partner at their firm and they're just not, jiving with what's happening. Like, I just don't see this as the place I want to be in the future. And they think, well, what do I do? Do I just get out of industry? Do I go start my own thing? I feel stuck. Well, insert Dark Horse, and how we operate is you come in, and effectively you build your book of business within our firm. So everybody's an employee, but we feed you leads and all that, give you the coaching, the infrastructure, and you can build your own book of business. You park it under the Dark Horse veil, for lack of a better term, and we handle all the, back-end support. So your IT infrastructure, your marketing, your website, the insurances, you name it, we're pretty much handling that. So you can just focus on providing service to clients and then managing the team that you have under you. So it's like a firm with training wheels. Think about that. You still have your autonomy to do some things on your own, but we all operate kind of the same way, all these different practices. And then myself, on the leadership team, so there's a number of us, and our sole function is to support the CPAs and their practices. So payroll administration, what we're talking about today, the hiring and onboarding, offboarding, we just handle all that for them, so they don't have to focus on it. They can focus on just taking care of clients, which is a full-time job in itself. Another thing too we've learned is, accountants as a whole are not great business owners. There's just a lot that goes into it, and the demands of the job are intense. So, if we can remove that, component for them, and they can just focus on being good practitioners, it's a win-win for everybody. So, high level, that's how it works, but probably a whole different podcast to explain our business model.
Yeah, I love. So is the analogy, just out of curiosity, right? Is it like a real estate agent who hangs their shingle under like Coldwell Banker?
You can think of it that way.
Independent.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's super helpful.
Yes.
That's interesting.
So Max, tell us a little bit about how you guys onboard your new staff and what that process looks like, especially since you guys have such a large staff.
Are you asking from like the interviewing process, or like once we've given an offer
Yeah, just
letter?
in general. Like, I'd love to hear about like how are you finding these people, and then getting them up to speed and up to par and ready so that you can set them free in your firm.
So finding people, we are blessed, I guess, because that has not been a problem that we've really had up to this point, knock on wood, just because given our model, there's just demand for it. So generally how it works is, once we find qualified candidates, we have a very, structured process for interviews. So like people are going to go through multiple rounds just to qualify them. And it's not just, figuring out, are they technically competent, but a big thing is the whole cultural fit, because myself and just a number of other people have come from firms with toxic culture, and it's so pervasive in our industry. So like, we're very cognizant of that. Just like, is this person going to plug in and, contribute back and just be pleasant to work with in a day in and day out? Because that goes a long way. So very structured, interviewing process. And then when it gets to the point where we want to issue a job offer, it gets sent out. Once it's signed, we have a cadence. So, within a few hours of somebody signing, we have a welcome onboarding email that just sets the expectations. Here's how your computer is going to get delivered to you. Here's the next steps, like pretty much everything people need to know. So they're not just, left there thinking like, well, what now? I start in a month, but like, what do I do? We let them know up front, so the expectation's set. Then from there, once people start, we have a very well-defined training process. So, on average, it takes us about 3 weeks to onboard a new person once they start, which is the training component. So the first 2 days, we're going to do it live sessions with them. And we also have people start in classes too. So we don't have people just start randomly. We like to try to batch them together. And we always do it the first Monday of each month because, back in the day when we were just, getting off the ground, we had people starting left and right. And it was just an administrative, pain to, have people start, Tuesday and then, a week later on a Thursday that somebody start. It was just inefficient. You lose track of where people are at. And it didn't make a good experience for the employees. So we batch them together first Monday of every month. We have a class start. And everybody, doesn't matter if you're, an incoming partner or, you're mopping the floors here. Everybody's doing, going through the same training for the most part. And we like to do the first 2 days in person just to make that human connection because, don't ask me to quote where I saw this, but, the study has shown that like the onboarding experience, if it's a good experience, it helps exponentially with your retention of employees and just their overall job satisfaction. So, given where the accounting industry is at right now with, there being a talent shortage, the last thing you want is to lose good talent. So we're trying to just make it a good onboarding experience from the onset. 2 days of training live. And then from there, we have tirelessly worked on building out a robust learning management system. So people are provided checklists of everything they need to go through, every module they need to watch, and then we have visibility into it, and they're going to go consume that content online or through our LMS, and then we have check-ins with them daily. What questions you had based off of what you saw. We have them work through simulations, and that goes on for really 3 weeks there. Then we have some assessments for them just to make sure they're retaining it all. And at this point, it's always a kind of in flux and being modified. Maybe 3 weeks isn't long enough, but the big thing is we want to make it so it's digestible for people. Because, when we first started Dark Horse, this has evolved a lot over time, but we would have, try to train everybody in a week, which it's like drinking out of a fire hose. You're showing them 18 different softwares. Here's this process. Here's that process. They're nervous. They're at a new firm. And what we realized is, somebody starts, like we dive into how to use this advanced tax planning tool. They may not interact with that for 3 months, so by the time they get to it, they forgot the 45-minute spiel we gave them, 3 months ago. They have no idea how to use it. But by leveraging the learning management system, they absorb it during training. They then know where to go back and re-reference that, 3 months down the road when they're ready to actually use that software. So I guess kind of in a nutshell, that's the process there.
Yeah, it seems real well oiled.
It definitely does. I'm assuming so. I think it's interesting, right? It sounds like there's probably been a lot of trial and error to get you guys where you're at today. You mentioned the first one of like, we tried to do it in a week, and, Lexi and I have worked at multiple companies and hired people, and it's always different how you bring somebody on board. And so what are some of the, besides, realizing the length of time, what are some of the other things that you guys have learned through this process of getting it to where you're at today?
You got to have the ability to track it, because there's so many little nitty gritty things that you got to do that if you don't have a system that's like a checklist that you can go to, that there's visibility not only for the person being onboarded, but management to keep track of where they're at, stuff gets lost in the shuffle. People will miss a training. Then you're expecting them to do, X, Y, Z in their job, and they don't know how to do it. And then there's friction. So it's that transparency and having checklists and something for people to work off of to know where you're at in the process. That's been a big learning for us. And I think just the amount of time it takes, because I remember when I started my first job, it was, they gave me my computer, just showed me how to use nothing. I had a manager come sit with me for like 2 hours in an afternoon, and like showed me around a few things, and they're like, all right, good luck. And I just figured it all out. And it was, I was young, so I was like willing to slug through it, but like that wasn't a great experience, so we try to do, everything in our power to not make that happen for, really anybody that starts. You want to hold their hand to a degree, just so they feel comfortable with it. And then, empower them to take it from there.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's so true. So, it's a lot. It's a lot to onboard people. It's a lot to keep them happy. It's a lot of stuff to keep organized. What tools are you using to do all of this? What helps you guys?
Probably the two main systems that we really leverage is we're on Gusto, as our firm's payroll's on Gusto. So that's been from just like the compliance aspect of everything with HR, that's been great. So once we get some basic information, the offer letter's been signed, we can invite the new hire to Gusto, and that's going to prompt them to do all like the your I-9s, upload a copy of your passport, all that stuff that's just a pain to track down. They just upload it directly into Gusto, it's good to go. Our benefits are integrated in there. So, once people get logged in, they can go read about all the insurance offerings we have and, what the company's, covering and get your dependents all signed up. So like that's just automated for us, which has been very nice. And then the other system we use is just our workflow management system, which we use Carbon here at Dark Horse. And so we have checklists that are built down there, and we've just learned over time, like what we need to do. So we're always adding stuff in, removing it, just, based off what's going on. And that's kind of our Bible we go off of. We have an internal one that we use from a management perspective, like have we collected all their documents? Have they gone out to the website? Have they had these meetings with, these key people, yada, yada, yada. And then the new hire also has their checklist that they're going off of, like, here's all your training modules. Here's, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this simulation. So those two systems, I guess in our learning management system as well, are probably the three big tools that we're using.
So how do you, I actually run an education team, and so I do understand learning management systems, but I'm assuming, what is the process to identify new software that you would bring on, right? Because it's not just you and a couple people. You're rolling this out to this large firm. And how do you guys find and evaluate new software? And then once you do, what is the process to get a training module set up so that you can make sure people are up to date? So that's obviously multiple questions in one. So how do you evaluate it? And then what is the process to understand it well enough to then train other people on it?
Simple answer, it's a giant pain to evaluate new software because it's never ending. Or there's always a new widget, a new app, and people always want to plug something in because, I can gain some efficiency here. That being said, at this point, we feel pretty good about, at least our base stuff that we have in place. We're always analyzing, like, is there a better tool out there? So, step one is, is this a lateral move? Like if we're going to, switch to this software, plug this in, what are we giving up? Because we're probably having to get rid of something. What are the downstream effects of implementing this new software? If we plug this in here, is that going to have, impacts 4 steps later in our workflow? So that's probably the biggest challenge with identifying new softwares is just what's the global impact of plugging it in? Right. Then you go through analysis of, is it secure? Nowadays with all the cyber issues out there, it's, you want to make sure that your information that you're going to have in that system isn't getting leaked out. But if it passes all those sniff tests, then it's the real hard part, which is, understanding it. So usually we'll have somebody at the firm, generally on leadership, be just the champion of that piece of software. So they're going to learn the ins and outs. And then once they feel comfortable with it, we document, what videos, or if I knew nothing about this, what would we want to know about this software and how to use it effectively? And then we start creating content. Luckily nowadays there's things like Loom. There's 20 other video recording applications out there, and people just take stabs at creating their content in Loom, and then we get it translated in the learning management system. With AI and everything, you can take your voice transcription and create transcripts that people else can read, and then there's questions. So it's labor intensive, and it's never done. That's the thing. We're always making modifications to it. Process change, we plug in this new app, like we have to go create content for it. And a big thing too that we've learned with the LMS is, I'm sure you guys have experienced this before, but you go watch a video on something, it's 45 minutes long, like I don't want to watch this, and you're trying to fast forward through it to find that 2-minute clip where you're trying to figure out how to change a setting. So whenever we're creating content for the LMS, we really focus on making it bite-sized. So it leads to maybe there being 75 videos on a given piece of software, but they're 2 to 5 minutes long, so that when a user wants to go re-reference that, they can find it easily, get what they want, and carry on, versus being like, I don't want to go watch that video for 45 minutes and then just spending an hour clicking buttons to try to figure it out on their own. So,
oh my gosh, it's so true. We talk about this all the time, especially if you have kids, and if you're on TikTok or you're on social media. Our culture has changed so much that we want instant information. And, having to run an education team, back in the day, we'd have webinars, right? They'd be an hour, they'd be 2 hours. I personally, I clearly must have ADHD. I can't sit there and do that because I can't remember all the stuff that's coming at me. And so micro learning seems to be the new way to learn things. I learn, it's a joke. I love TikTok. Absolutely love it. But I learn so much in small increments of pieces of information because they're bite-sized enough that you can take something and then you can go do something with it, and as opposed to those larger pieces. So it's interesting that you guys are finding that as well, that I would almost rather have 75 little, 2-minute things than, do an hour and a half type of thing of all this information to kind of come in at me, because I feel like I can learn it in increments. And I feel like you learn faster that way. Me personally, anyway.
100%. And on top of that too, I think everything you said right there is spot on. And then if it's long, people just won't use it. It's like, well, the resources there, I'm like, God, they just won't use it. That's what we found. So you got to make it bite-sized for all the reasons you just cited.
I love that.
Love it. So in the same sentiment of like, getting your new hires up to speed, and how long is this take? I mean, that was a lot that you were just talking about. So what are we talking about? Weeks? Are we talking about a month?
Yeah. So like the hard training, it's 3 weeks, but realistically, we have officially closed out somebody as having completed training 6 weeks after they start. There's some like lingering assessments that we do, because what also we found is, people learn in so many different ways. Some people are audio, some people are visual, some people read, but for the most part, like especially in accounting, a lot of it's doing. You have to interact with the software. So, once they're trained on it, we have check-ins on key ones like Carbon. We're going to make you prove that you can set clients up, you can create work, to create, all just the basic things that you need to do. Because if you don't test people on that, like, I got it. And then they do it wrong forever. Right. And then they learn the bad habit. And it's just so much more work to fix it, to train, untrain that bad habit versus just, making sure they got it down the first time through. And on top of that too, what we've experienced is new hires, they're generally going to say, I got it, just because they want to be easy. Right. They don't want to, cause a rift, which, it's like, well, tell us if you don't, understand it. So we kind of call them out on it to a degree. Like, well, prove to us that you know how to use it. If you don't, then, coach a little bit more and let's try again.
Yeah, no. And to follow up on that, so you guys use ProConnect, ProConnect Professional Tax. How is it getting them up to speed? And like, has that been easy for you guys? I mean, you've been with us for a long time now. So talk a little bit about that and getting all your new hires and even the new features and things that have come and helped all of your teams.
Yeah. ProConnect, well, here's the thing. I think Intuit just naturally makes pretty intuitive products, to use. And, for the most part, anybody joining a firm has not been on ProConnect. They're coming from, Thomson Reuters or CCH, so, but if you've been in a big tax software like that, if you learned one, you can learn the other one. It takes a few weeks. That's actually an area that we don't have a ton of training, just because the interfaces always change. There's always something new. So we kind of get the baseline of how to navigate through it. But with ProConnect specifically, that is, once you're in the seat, you bang your head against the wall a little bit just until you learn, oh, this input's over here, this input's over there. I think you kind of just have to go through a season, with us to really understand the tech software specifically. But we're going to give you the basic tools to at least know how to navigate it, to go find the answer, and you just learn it through practice.
Do you guys have like a feedback model or something with new people that are coming on board, so that they're like, if you're hearing from multiple people, oh, I took this or I didn't understand it, or hey, I'm realizing there are these features and functionality that, gosh, I wish I knew about it, but you guys didn't train me on it to either update things or tweak things? Yeah.
So our LMS actually does that for us. So if people are going through enough questions, they can leave comments in real time, and it pings, all those people involved. So we can, we have a gap there. There's that. Yep. Then on top of that, through that 3-week training period, there's daily check-ins that they have with, a tax director or a CAS director, our CRO, whoever it is, or, people can, bring up questions that they have at that point in time. This doesn't make sense. And then, we have, once people are through training, company-wide meetings several times a week with certain pods, our principals and accelerators, we meet up with them, meet up with support staff, and just that feedback naturally gets to us. So, and then on top of it, we just know too, when people are doing things consistently incorrectly based off of what we think it should be done, we probably have a gap in training there. Right. So,
that makes sense.
We'll reemphasize it, maybe do it live and then get that content added to the LMS.
So now that you have this whole kind of system on board, I think you said it was about 6 weeks or so. So it's 3 weeks of classes, if you will, and it's about 6 weeks until they go through the process. How long do you feel like it takes for people to feel like they've got it? Is it like at Intuit, we always joke that, it's about 3 months of drinking from the fire hose. About 6 months, you actually know what your job is. But there's this delineation that you see when someone just kind of just gets it and they just can run from there. But it's beyond the training period.
I would say the same time frame that you said right there. It's probably the same for me. Kind of depending on the role. But yeah, it just takes time,
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's so many softwares out there nowadays. It's like you got your CRM, you got your workflow management, you got your tax software, you got this plugin over here, even just the Microsoft stuff, we're very heavy in Microsoft Teams. So like all the tips and tricks and various things you can do in there, it just takes people a long time, especially if they haven't been on that platform before. Outlook, you can do so many different things in there. Here's some cool tips, and it just takes time and practice and reinforcement. A big thing too is we repeat ourselves a lot because it just takes time for things to sink into people's head. So we're very, repetitious, I guess, with what we're saying. You just over and over ad nauseum. I think some people roll their eyes at us just because we're saying the same thing so often because it takes a while for it to sink in with everybody. So you can't say something once and expect it to work.
Right. There's the old adage of what repetition doesn't ruin the prayer, right?
Yeah.
It's doing things over and over again. It's so true because you really can tell when somebody kind of gets it. And then you even have every company has politics and acronyms and things like that. That you just see these people, they're like, I don't even know what you just said to me because you use 7 acronyms in 3 sentences. Like, where's the translator that happens in there beyond just even the software and taking on all the stuff, right? So it's all of it, which is interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Max, so if you could give firms or your peers one piece of advice that they're trying to get their onboarding process in shape before, the busy season coming up again, right? What would you say?
I think it depends, what kind of the size of that firm is and, where their gaps are, because it just comes down to sequencing. What makes the most sense? If you're, trying to hire maybe, 2 new staff members, you probably don't have to go through all those steps that we go through because we have just at the volume that we have to make a repeatable process. But I think the big thing is probably to look at how you're going to train people. The compliance up front, that could be solved for, especially with, accountants generally can figure that out. There's so many tools out there, but what is the experience for the employee once they start? So figuring out what you're going to do to train them, because I think the last thing that anybody wants to experience when they start is an afternoon or two with a manager just giving them a rundown and here's a pile of files, figure it out. So figure out what you're going to do for training, who needs to be involved. And if you find yourself training a lot, spend that time investing in a learning management system. I remember when we started, it was kind of scary because, you watch these, you watch videos that softwares have, and they seem so professional. And you're sitting there thinking gosh, we got to put that together. I'm not a software trainer, but just take the plunge, record yourself, get used to your voice on camera. And before you know it, it's done. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't let, great be the enemy of good, and just get content created, because if you can get it documented and have it in an LMS, it pays dividends for as long as you keep using it.
Absolutely. No, that's exactly what growing firms need to hear and what they want to hear. And it's so great to see how you guys have grown. We've watched you guys do some really great things over the years. So thank you so much for walking us through your approach.
Yeah, I think this has been absolutely amazing. And I love how you guys have created these processes. They're repeatable, about bringing new people on. They're all over the country, right? And I love the starting in person, using the LMS, teaching about the new pieces of software, having that feedback loop and things like that. I think that's amazing. And it's a great way to show that if you can get strategic about what it is that you're doing, you're able to get ahead. So thank you so much, Max. We really enjoyed this discussion today and appreciate you talking with us.
100%. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being part of Deduct This, powered by ProConnect Tax. If today's conversation gave you something new to think about, visit accountants.intuit.com for more insights and resources made for professionals like you. We'll be right here, helping you turn expertise into opportunity.